Basch from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I'm a principal planner in health and land use, and I have been working on age and dementia-friendly community assessments and designation since about 2019. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about that, but also how some of the priorities that we find in that process relate to the Affordable Homes Act. So, age and dementia-friendly Pioneer Valley, the PVPC region is Hampden and Hampshire counties. The population is about 600,000 people, with Springfield being our largest community at about 150,000. Over the years, we have helped about 15 communities become age and dementia-friendly. Some of them went and did it on their own. The northern hill towns did their own process, but we found that each community is very different. You know, we have some larger communities, smaller ones, so we've really been going town by town before doing a regional designation, which we will be doing soon. But it's really a process of community engagement. So it was great to hear the last speakers and, how to get really into depth about community engagement. We have used mainly surveys, listening sessions. Each community has a task force that works on overseeing the whole process, designing the listening sessions, and reviewing any draft reports. So in the surveys, most of the towns, this is an example from Amherst, housing comes to the top as the top issue that folks want their towns to focus on in the next 5 years. Other results show transportation, health, and community services. But as you dive into housing in other parts of the surveys, people want more affordable housing. They want to be able to downsize in their communities. So affordable in the median income sense of the word, but also missing middle housing. So people just want to have less to take care of, but they also want to live in their communities. They want accessibility, and we know that New England has maybe 7% age-friendly housing, which means, first floor, bathroom and bedroom, no step entrance. So getting accessibility included in new housing is really important. And walkable communities. People still want to walk even when they can't drive anymore. And then also support for aging in place. So if people don't have housing to move into and they want to stay in their homes, support services, transportation, even help with basic tasks like shoveling, yard work, and home maintenance have all come to the top in those surveys. And most people want to stay in their homes and in their communities. So these are results from Amherst. Again, on the left is whether people want to stay in their community, and on the right is staying in their home. So generally people say, it's extremely important to be able to stay in my home and in my community. But then when we ask in the next 5 years, if your circumstances were to change, what type of housing would you want to move into? So this graph shows in the blue where people live now, in the orange is where they would like to live in 5 years. And so a lot of people want to live in, they want to remain independent, but they want to live in something smaller, apartment or condo, senior independent living that's affordable, assisted living, and then a location close to services is also important. And so all of these will be supported by the Affordable Homes Act in a number of ways. And I think Jesse is going to go into a little more detail about what's in the act, but I picked out some elements that support housing for older adults. And so I'm going to kind of go through that quickly. I did bring handouts from the Affordable Homes Act fact sheet, so I have some of those if anyone would like to take them and look into each one further. And I'm not going to go into accessory dwelling units because I think Jesse's going to go into that a little further also. The Affordable Homes Act, one of the big elements of it is funding, and it provides funding for production of more affordable housing and innovative solutions for housing, funding for rehabilitation, and investment in existing housing, infrastructure improvements, home modification loan programs, and then planning grants. So all of those are supported by funding in the Act. So funds for housing production. It includes $800 million for an affordable housing trust funds to create more affordable housing for households up to 110% of area median income. $425 million for housing stabilization and investment, so it supports preservation, new construction, and rehabilitation. And it also includes $10 million for small properties state acquisition funding pilot program. I just included that because I've heard from many communities that there may be some housing that's affordable through tax incentives, but the affordability is going to expire. And so this allows nonprofits to purchase small properties and keep them affordable. There's another provision, I'm not sure if it's this one, that allows for nonprofits to buy vacant housing and make it into affordable housing. So that also comes up in some of our communities where several, they have, like the town of Ware has 70 houses that are vacant and owe tax sales. So the town actually owns them and wants to convert them to affordable housing. And then $30 million for state surplus property disposition. So authorization to support efforts to use state surplus land to address housing and other critical needs. Such as demolition or remediation. So like former state hospitals or other state land. It also provides funds for energy infrastructure planning. So $275 million for sustainable and green housing initiatives, including innovative ways to unlock new solutions, such as office conversions, modular homes, and accessory dwelling units. $175 million for housing infrastructure. So that's very important for small towns that may not have water and sewer or may need road improvements in order to build more housing. $25 million for community planning grants, and I'll get into planning a little later, but it's always good to plan ahead for where you want housing and what kind. And then $20 million for smart growth programs. So the 40R and 40Y, that's 40R is designating an area of town for smart growth. 40Y is designating an area for starter home communities. It's got funds for public housing modernization and innovation. So a lot of existing public housing may not be accessible or may be, getting run down. So it provides a lot more funds to support public housing modernization. Also $200 million for public housing demonstration programs. So encourages innovation for new affordable units. And then funds for supportive housing. So this is really important for especially the smaller communities which may not have the infrastructure to build supported housing developments. It allows for supportive housing for veterans, so you can prioritize supportive housing for veterans in the community. Supportive housing pool fund, so that is a fund that provides flexible funding for supportive housing, and it can fund case management, service coordination, and tenant services. So we've talked a lot about in our communities about, even doing smaller supportive housing projects where you have a number of affordable units with one shared support service person. It's got the Housing Innovation Fund, which supports innovative and alternative forms of rental housing, including single occupancy units, transitional housing, and housing for seniors and veterans. So at this time, the homeless rate is actually pretty high for people who are I've heard a number of anecdotes of people who have lost their housing because their rental unit gets sold, and there's nowhere to go. So this will allow more transitional housing for those situations. Also, we know that housing first is most important. If someone has housing, they have the ability to work and to do other things. So that's really important also. And then community-based housing, so funds for development of integrated housing for people with disabilities, including older adults, and priorities for people who are in institutions. We have several nursing homes that have closed in our region, so it's great to see that funding there also. And then funds for aging in place and expansion of tax credits. So the home modification loan program, that it has increased funding. You're probably all aware of that, but that allows people to age in place and modify their homes for accessibility and healthy aging. It also allows for funding to build accessory dwelling units. So if you're income eligible, you can build an accessory dwelling unit with those funds and make a little income on your property. And then support for the Healthy Homes program, which does abatement of asbestos and lead paint and mold. Really important for all of our communities that have older housing that has a lot of those issues. And then it expands tax credits. So home ownership production tax credit, the community investment tax credit has increased. Commercial property conversion tax credit, that's a new one. So commercial properties can be converted to housing. And then it expands the historic rehabilitation tax credit. Some of the regulatory reforms include seasonal community designation. So the state is going to designate certain areas like on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, on the Cape and in the Berkshires as seasonal communities, and they may designate other communities as well. If you are designated, the legislative body can choose whether or not to accept that designation, other than those other areas that will be automatically designated. And that allows you to set year-round occupancy restrictions and develop housing with preference for seasonal employees. So we know workforce housing is really difficult in a lot of those seasonal communities, so that will help there. It allows accessory dwelling units by right, as we heard from Ryan. Surplus public land disposition reforms, and then receivership reforms for affordable housing. So that's an area where if the state owns the properties, if they're in receivership, those properties can go to nonprofits to make them into affordable housing. And then the commercial property conversion program, which I mentioned. And then up to 10% of housing may be set aside for preference for low to moderate income veterans in the community. And then 3 new commissions will be developed, the Extremely Low Income Commission, Senior Housing Commission, and Accessible Housing Commission. These will all benefit older adults. As we know, many are extremely low income. So it's just these commissions will meet to try to develop more housing for those populations. So what can cities and towns and citizens do? So this gets into the planning work that is a lot of my colleagues do and that I do at the Regional Planning Commission. Plan for the future, which is now. We have this act has passed. A lot of towns are not quite ready to say where the housing is going to go in their communities. So generally, we're encouraging all of our communities to engage older residents in the process, identify who needs housing, where it could be, and what it might look like. As part of our age and dementia-friendly community process, we have been developing community assessments and action plans through this community engagement process. But more and more, as communities are developing comprehensive plans, we try to put that process in the comprehensive planning process. So rather than having a separate report, we do a chapter of the plan that's focused on health and healthy aging, and ensure that goals and objectives throughout the plans incorporate the needs of older adults. So in our region, 17 of 43 cities and towns have plans dated after 2010, which is still 15 years old. So we have a lot of work to do there. Comprehensive plans are not required, but they're really the main planning document that you want in your community. Housing production plans and housing needs assessments. So housing production plans look really deeply into the data and do have a community engagement process, look at available land and structures for where housing might go. Housing production plans allow communities to kind of get around the 40B legislation, which says that if you don't have 10% of a subsidized housing in your community, developers can come in and go around the zoning process. So in our region, only 3 communities in Hampden County and 3 in Hampshire County have more than 10% affordable housing. So also a lot of work to do there. And then only 5 of our 43 cities and towns have adopted housing production plans, and they do expire also. So we're working on those gradually. We have just applied for funding in partnership with Wayfinders and the Donahue Institute to do housing production plans in every town in the region, and also a regional housing plan. We're hoping that will, give that a kickstart, a boost to get all of our towns ready for building more affordable housing. And then updating zoning. So all cities and towns will have to update their accessory dwelling unit bylaws. The law goes into effect in February, I believe, beginning of February. And there will be guidelines for what those will look like. They can't be restrictive. There's certain things they can add for, certain requirements, but only, very, very limited, I guess, regulations that towns can adopt for accessory dwelling units. And then reviewing zoning to make sure it allows for the types of housing that people want. So multifamily, congregate, or supportive housing, looking at whether you're encouraging larger developments to include connection to sidewalks and multi-use paths, including indoor and outdoor places to gather, so making them social spaces. And then provisions for accessibility, providing incentives for building more accessible units. That's another thing to look at in zoning. And then smart growth, again, having higher density closer to town centers and services and amenities, so that people can really walk to the places that they want to go in the community. And then encouraging advocacy for housing in the community. This is really important because, as I'm working with these working groups in all of our cities and towns, a lot of them are led by councils on aging, include older residents, as well as other municipal employees or agencies that work with older adults. They can't do the zoning themselves, but they can participate, or the planning. They can participate in that process, encouraging their friends, getting out to listening sessions, saying what type of housing they want, where they want it. They can create a housing trust or a housing coalition in a town. Or in a region, and CHAPA is an organization that provides technical assistance in doing that, really figuring out who the stakeholders are and how to engage them in that process so that there is a coalition in place. So when a development is proposed, there are people to go out and advocate for it. Attending meetings to voice approval for housing development in a proposed area, and especially if it's supported by a comprehensive plan or housing production plan, just going out and saying, yeah, we want this. I can't tell you how many cities and towns have boards that are not supportive of a new housing. So the last one is really voting for leaders who are supportive of developing housing for all incomes and ages in the community. So just making sure that everyone is involved in that process is really important. That's mine in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I'll invite Jesse to come up.